Another example of a market that is at risk is South Korea. South Korea has been a very big growth market for our processed potato industry here, and our sales there have grown from about 17 million to 34 million a year. And we've negotiated, Congress has not passed, but we have negotiated a free trade agreement with Korea that would take the 18% duty or tax that's being charged on frozen potato products and reduce it to zero. So this market that's already growing could, we can anticipate that it will be an even more significant export market for this community. But Congress hasn't passed the agreement. And the European Union is meeting with Korea right now to try and negotiate the same deal. And if the European Union negotiates the same deal and signs it, and Congress doesn't, the tax will come down on European potato products, but not on U.S. potato products. And that will put this market that has been a growth market, it will put us in that growth market at a competitive disadvantage. Now, federal trade policy can also work in our favor. If we have aggressive pro-trade policies at the federal level, we can benefit and our communities can flourish as a result of it. The Central American Free Trade Agreement is a very good example of that. The United States, and again this is primarily Washington State, dominates the frozen fry market in Central America. It's gone from $4 million before the agreement was signed to about $11 million a year because of that agreement. So trade is clearly a critical part of our local economies and our state economy. When trade is open and flowing, people working on the docks in Tacoma or at air freight facilities at SeaTac or in vineyards and wineries in Walla Walla all benefit. Hundreds of thousands of jobs in this state are directly dependent upon having a competitive international trade economy. We cannot take that international trade economy or those hundreds of thousands of jobs for granted. And yet, I think that some of our officials are taking our international competitiveness for granted. There are three sectors in our state, within our state, that really shape our international competitiveness and that we need to pay attention to. And they are transportation, taxation, and education. And I'd like to talk about three of the competitive threats to this very important sector of our state's economy. Let's start with talking about transportation and the relationship between transportation and having competitive ports, and the relationship between transportation and having competitive ports and having a vibrant international trade economy and jobs. And when we talk about transportation, what we're really talking about is the foundation of competitiveness for the maritime, industrial, and agricultural sector in our state. And to have a competitive international trade foundation to support our industrial, manufacturing, and agricultural sector, this transportation system needs to be able to do two things well. First, we have to be able to move our goods, the goods we produce in Washington State, through our seaports and airports and onto our international customers. We've got to have a transportation system that will do that. And second, in order to have vibrant ports in Puget Sound, the ports of Puget Sound have got to be able to move imports from Asia to the American Midwest, to Chicago and St. Louis, faster than our competitor ports. Now, while a lot of people, I think, recognize the importance of having these vibrant ports and having efficient ports that can move cargo in and out quickly, and in and out more quickly than our competitor ports, I don't think as many people understand that the ports of Puget Sound right now are in a competitive dogfight with the ports of British Columbia. That the ports of Seattle and Tacoma together are in a competitive dogfight with the ports of Vancouver and Prince Rupert. And that dogfight is over who can move freight from the northwest of the United States or from British Columbia to the American Midwest more efficiently and faster. And after 2014, which is not that far away, after 2014, we're going to be in this dogfight not just with British Columbia, but with Savannah and Houston and Charleston. That's because in 2014, the Panama Canal is going to be widened to accommodate 21st century sized ships. Right now, those ships can't fit through the Panama Canal. So ships full of goods from Asia have to come to the west coast of the United States or British Columbia, and unload their goods onto roads or rail and then move them to Chicago or St. Louis, where most of the distribution occurs. But after 2014, when the Panama Canal is widened, this next generation of ships will be able to fit through the canal. And then there will be an all-water route from Asia through the canal to Houston, to Savannah, and Charleston. And we will be competing with them as well. Canada gets this. Canada gets the connection between jobs and efficiently moving cargo to and from the American Midwest. Just 2 months ago, the Port of Vancouver, Delta Port, announced a $392 million expansion project that will increase their land mass by 49 acres and allow them to move goods in and out of Vancouver more efficiently. The Port of Prince Rupert, with significant federal subsidies, are expanding a port, actually creating a port almost out of thin air, are creating a port that by some accounts plans to move as much cargo as the ports of Seattle and Tacoma did combined prior to the recession. And most importantly, with significant federal funds and with integrated transportation decision-making, Canada is building a freight corridor directly from British Columbia to Chicago and St. Louis. That freight corridor in Canada is a competitive threat to our port's viability and to our state's trade economy. And it's not just Canada. The governor of Georgia recently announced a $300 million similar project to move trucks from Georgia to the American Midwest more rapidly. And the Heartland Corridor on the East Coast will shave a day off of moving goods from the East Coast to the American Midwest. Now, be assured, we're not just sitting back and watching all this happen around us at the ports of Seattle and Tacoma. Over the last 10 years, the Port of Seattle has spent $45 million of our own money helping the State Department of Transportation and cities around King and Pierce counties build the necessary overpasses and roads and bridges we need to move freight through the cities, over the Cascades, and on its way to the American Midwest, and to facilitate moving trucks from this area into the ports of Seattle and Tacoma. And over the last 15 years, the ports of Seattle and Tacoma combined have spent roughly about $1 billion, ensuring that these aging mid-20th century ports were competitive 21st century terminals. And as a result of those initiatives, both in transportation and also increasing the competitiveness of our ports inside our port gates, we have built in the ports of Seattle and Tacoma a solid background of support for our state's trade economy, from airplane parts to computer games to hay and hops, from apples to the wine and food processing packaging created in this community. We have the capacity now to significantly increase the volume of cargo we move in and out of Puget Sound. Except, as a state, we have not been sufficiently investing in our freight infrastructure outside the port gates. And that underinvestment could be a competitive threat to our state's trade economy. Now, how did we get in this situation? I actually found out how we got in this situation when I went to a transportation conference up in Vancouver, BC a few months ago. And at that conference, the transport minister came out from Ottawa with a great big check for millions of dollars, and he was delivering this check for millions of dollars to the people of Vancouver for some new grade separation projects that will allow them to move product from their port through their city and on their way to the American Midwest more rapidly than Puget Sound ports. And in presenting this check to the people of Vancouver, he said, "We in Canada have one advantage over our American competitors." He said, "In Canada, we consider transportation projects strategic investments. And in America," he said, "they consider transportation projects pork." And he was right. We spread transportation dollars around, trying to make sure that every area gets a project, even if that is not where it will generate the most jobs or move the most cargo or people, or even if the projects aren't connected in any sort of way. Our approach is political, but it is not smart. The fact that mayors come to me and say, Bill, it is easier for us to get new funding, not easy, but easier for us to get new funding for a new transportation project than it is to get funding to maintain transportation infrastructure we already have, even though we have $90 million in deferred maintenance and truck routes. The fact that it's easier to get money to build new stuff before we even take care of what we've got shows that our transportation priority setting in this state is broken.